Olá, eu sou Katiuscia Sotomayor e este é o AgroAmérica, programa em parceria com o Instituto Interamericano de Cooperação para a Agricultura, o IICA, aqui no AgroMais, seu canal voltado para o agronegócio 24 horas. A proposta é mostrar iniciativas inovadoras e compartilhar boas práticas dos 34 Estados-membros, que podem ser replicadas em todo o mundo na busca pelo desenvolvimento agrícola e pelo bem-estar rural. Hoje o assunto é a importância do agroturismo para a retomada econômica dos países do Caribe, principalmente com a crise causada pela pandemia. Por causa da Covid-19, a população dessa região enfrenta um cenário complexo, com grandes impactos, principalmente por conta da dependência da importação de alimentos. Outra consequência da pandemia está na redução da renda da população e do trabalho agrícola. É preciso ainda somar os efeitos das mudanças climáticas, as condições de seca prolongada e as diferenças no desenvolvimento das áreas urbana e rural, entre outros problemas que afetam o mundo todo, na verdade. Assim, juntar agricultura e turismo pode ser um bom negócio. Para falar sobre isso, vamos receber o representante do IICA em Suriname e coordenador de relações especiais dos países do Caribe, Curt Delice. Hello, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
I would like to start our chat posing this question. Caribbean countries depend on tourism to support their national gross domestic product. How can these countries rebuild their tourism after the pandemic? Is the agritourism a viable option?
Yes, thank you for that question. And this is something that has been in discussion for a very long time in the Caribbean, the linking of agriculture to tourism in a viable way and meaningful way. Tourism is the number one income earning activity in many Caribbean countries. We are looking at, in some cases, up to 74% of the gross national product of these countries are entirely dependent on tourism in some cases. Many of the countries are approaching almost 50% of the gross national product, which is dependent on tourism. Another important aspect of tourism for the Caribbean is that the tourism arrivals, either stay-over visitors or cruise visitors, we are looking at, these are several times more than the population of the countries. If we look at the figures for 2019, we would see, for example, the overall population of the Caribbean is basically of CARICOM is all basically 18.5 million in total, and we are looking at tourism arrivals for 2019 in the region of 62 million visitors between stayover and cruise. So that represents a significant market for the region, because the tourists coming in, they have to consume food. So there is that viable market of tourism readily presented in the Caribbean for the country. The challenge would be, how do we align that tourism to agriculture in a meaningful way to generate sustainable agricultural development? That within itself is probably the most important prospect for the Caribbean islands. How do they solve that nexus between tourism and agriculture, at the same time reducing the high food import bill that they have? And we have made some inroads. CARICOM has launched a plan which they call 25 in 5, where they are looking to reduce the food import bill by 25% in the next 5 years. A lot of that hinges upon our ability to capitalize on this large tourism market that is coming in. Not only in the supply of food, but also in other aspects of tying the tourists coming in, especially the Airbnb tourists, which is a new phenomenon where tourists are coming in to look at new natural experiences where they could stay in the houses of rural farmers, rural entrepreneurs, and experience the farming activity that they are engaged in. So there is a lot of scope for engagement and benefit of that linkage between agriculture and tourism. and it is an active work. It is an active work in progress for many of the Caribbean region.
And what kind of knowledge transfer Brazil and the Caribbean can share in this matter? After all, we have some similarities, such as the climate.
Yes, there's, in my view, there's a lot of scope for transfer of knowledge between Brazil, particularly in climate. We have, because many of the Caribbean islands were colonies of European superpowers, the traditional linkage has been with these countries, and we have not traditionally looked to Latin America for opportunities for positive agricultural development. That is an opportunity that could be very important for the region. You mentioned the climate, and we have tropical climates. Many of our students go off to study agriculture, looking at temperate crops. Brazil has the opportunity where the agriculture that is being practiced is readily applicable to the Caribbean climate. And we have not capitalized on that. The universities that are in Brazil, well known internationally, of high quality and high standards, and they could transfer a lot of this knowledge, tropical agriculture, to the Caribbean. Also, Brazil has made several important strides in terms of the development of the agro-industrial complex and the vertical integration of agriculture. A lot of the agriculture in the Caribbean is still centered around the production side, and it has been very challenging to ensure that seamless vertical integration where we move into value-added products. I think there's a lot we could learn from Brazil in that regard, even when you look at sort of the traditional crops, which are common, like cassava, which is traditionally consumed in the Caribbean, and we have not moved from the rustic home processing into more standardized, mechanized processing. And in our engagement as IICA, we have been introducing some of the semi-industrial equipment technologies to the Caribbean region. A lot of these are produced in Brazil. I think there are opportunities for engagement along these lines, opportunities for markets even along these lines. The Embrapa has been doing some work in the region. I know here in Suriname, they have been working in upland ripe varieties, helping to improve productivity, yield, and resistance to ecological conditions. Embrapa is a well-known institution. A lot of these has not been readily transferred to other countries of the Caribbean region. Now, the language has been a problem and probably an obstacle in the past. I think one of the key areas that they could look for in the immediate term is ensuring that more students from the Caribbean are engaged in Brazilian universities, Brazilian centers of learning. They would have two opportunities that they begin to learn that knowledge, but also they're going to learn the language, which will allow us to begin to establish this kind of networking and information transfer, which is essential. Now, Director General of IICA in 2017 had organized a delegation from CARICOM to visit Brazil and Argentina, basically to begin to that kind of dialogue where we would see what is being done, some of the progress that has been made, some of the advances in the agricultural sector, and also to begin to define opportunities for change and positive collaboration under a South-South model of technical cooperation. There have been discussions, we've had follow-up meetings, but there's a lot of work to be done in that regard, where we could actively see that bridge being formed between countries like Brazil, like Argentina, and the Caribbean for much greater benefit of both regions. We have the tendency that we focus on crops that are traditionally consumed in temperate countries. And we are not focusing on crops where we have a comparative advantage. I think this is a key area that we could benefit in a relationship with Brazil.
And talking about specifically of agritourism, what do you think, in your opinion, we can learn from each other?
Well, in agritourism, there's a lot of scope. We know, for example, if you take, for example, in the case of Suriname, which is also in the Amazon basin, which are similar conditions to Brazil. And we have seen, for example, a lot of the tours, the hunting, tours, ecotourism ventures. We have seen a lot of progress in Brazil in terms of culinary tourism, how they utilize, for example, some of the produce that from the rainforest and convert them either into health foods, either into foods to improve the nutrition of lower income households. A lot of that can be replicated readily in the Caribbean. We have seen strong development in terms of moving the tourism away from that sand, sea, and sun model of the Caribbean and more into what Brazil has done, tying the agriculture with the tourism, with the culinary tourism, with the cultural festivals like Carnival, which also implicitly has a large culinary component attached to it. So there is these dimensions that we begin, because we have some of the similar traditions. We have the carnivals, we have an agricultural sector, we have a tourism sector, but for some reason, our tourism sector has been developed along the lines of sun, sea, and sun. And now we are looking to bridge that gap and incorporate more of these agricultural components. And there is a lot of scope for engagement with Brazil to learn some of these models, some of the new health foods. There have been discussions in the Caribbean where we are looking at incorporating within our tourism industry the whole concept of nutraceutical tourism, where some of the traditional medicinal herbs and medicinal plants that we have, even some of the traditional foods that may have medicinal benefits to them, that we also tie that into the tourists who are coming to the region. We believe that in that regard, in terms of the development of facilities, the research that has to be incorporated along with the development of such initiatives, Brazil has that kind of development that they could readily provide guidance, tutoring, and technical advice to the Caribbean, so that we could begin to develop and broaden these aspects and make that linkage between agriculture and tourism a much more profitable and equitable for the Caribbean countries themselves.
As you just said, the tourism has this great potential. But what do you think could farmers do to benefit from this idea? For example, you talked about an experience. So they should get together, form a group, apply for land and provide food while providing a place for people to visit, pick fresh produce, learn about the process, teach about it. Is this any projects focusing on that? Is there, any projects focusing on that?
Yes, well, we at IICA, we have been working to strengthen these components. Incidentally, the Center for Tropical Agriculture, the CTA, has been, is winding operations, and we have entered an agreement with CTA so that we would adopt some of the legacy assets of the CTA. And one of these legacy assets is that culinary tourism component. There are other agro-tourism initiatives that we have adopted under the CTA. There is a small funding that they provided so that we could continue the chef, one of the programs called Chef for Development, where professional chefs utilizing local products are promoted. We have also been in discussions with our office in Panama, where we are looking at exploring the development of a proposal to tie the whole idea of blockchain to agro-tourism development in the Caribbean. And here we are looking at things that helping farmers with the issues of traceability, issues of timely payments from buyers. These are things which are structural problems in the Caribbean. So there is a willingness on the part of farmers to engage, but there is also the need for increased training, increased sensitization. There is a need for auxiliary services to assist the farmers in bringing, for example, some of their own products, agrotourism products, to a standard and quality level that would make it acceptable for tourists coming in to stay. The issue of personal accident is critical if you are going to invite tourists to explore and experience real on-farm living. There is some strengthening required in insurance schemes to provide that kind of services, which would then allow farmers to buy at a reasonable rate for that. Now, the issue of organization of farmers is very important in that regard. We do have some very strong credit union organizations in the Caribbean, but somehow this has not translated into very strong producer organizations or agrotourism organizations at the national or even at the regional level. Whereas the mainstream tourism plan would have a strong organization, whereas farmers are concerned and small players in the industry, they are not properly organized. So that in itself represents a critical component in the support that we provide to the countries in helping to organize farmers into viable groups. It makes it easier for them to focus on issues as bulk purchasing. It makes it easier to deal with policy prescriptions to assist them in developing the agrotourism products. And it makes it easier for them themselves to lobby governments on their behalf or international organizations on their behalf for whether it is differentiated policies, whether it is for specific support mechanisms to help promote the industry. So yes, there is enormous potential, but also there is some work that needs to be done in putting in place the mechanism, the systems, the policies to facilitate that critical linkage between farmers and the tourism sector in a meaningful way.
Can we say that food insecurity and also gender inequality are still major concerns?
Food security is a major concern, and food security is a major concern from several standpoints. There is the need to produce food, of course, for local consumption, but also for the tourism industry. But within that, there is also the dilemma that what do we produce? Do we produce, do we focus as farmers and high-value products that tourists would like to consume? Or there is another aspect, do we promote our own local products, creating, and that's one of the rationale behind the Chef for Development, that how do we utilize our local products in more creative ways that we could increase consumption among the tourists coming in, and that benefit could accrue directly to the farmers who already have the know-how, how to deal with the product. In rural communities, the many rural women are engaged in the processing of traditional products like cassava, coconuts. So how do we get these onto the menu in restaurants? How do we get a wide diversity of products made out of local ingredients, local produce, onto the menu in our hotels as part of the everyday cuisine? That is also a challenge. At the same time, not compromising your ability to produce for the consumption of your population. Now, there is the aspect that where some of the countries have been speaking to the idea of food sovereignty, where there's greater attention paid to developing these same local produce and traditional local products and accruing the benefits as much as possible to the local economy. That would have the added benefit of substituting imported products and reducing your food import bill. So these are aspects that are constantly being tackled. CARICOM does have a food and nutrition security policy, and that is geared towards basically improving the food security situation of the countries in the Caribbean. So yes, that in and of itself is a constant work in progress. As I mentioned earlier, when we look at the issue of the food import bill, we were looking at a food import bill about just over $2 billion in the year 2000. By 2018, it had gone to $4.75 billion. Now we are projecting for 2020 a food import bill of $8 to $10 billion US. So you can imagine the implications of that amount of capital flight for countries in the region, especially in terms of scarce foreign exchange. So that remains a central objective of many of the countries. How do they get more control of the issue of food security? It is a central mandate of IICA to support the countries in that endeavor to strengthen the national and regional food systems to deal with that issue. We have very few countries in the region who produce above 50% of the food that they require for consumption. Some of the countries go up as much as 80% of the food needs being imported from external countries. And most critically, from outside the region, which is another factor of immediate concern. There are challenges in the region to the immediate increase in terms of regional trade in agri-products. One of the challenges is the poor transportation system between countries. So you have countries with excellence in the Caribbean, and you have countries with demands for these very same products, but there's not an efficient transportation mechanism to get the products from where they have them in excellence and where they are needed. And that is something that has been in discussion in CARICOM for a very long time. Unfortunately, it has not been dealt with adequately, and it remains a work in progress. Now, incidentally, we have just completed the development of a government-to-government trade platform, a trade portal, which is something that was developed for Central America, but now we have adopted it for use in the Caribbean. And we are hoping that that would allow, for example, ministries of agriculture to engage directly and in a more concise way on to alert each other when there are opportunities for export of products, whether you have an accident in your country, of any one product, that you could alert your regional counterparts about that accident, and they in turn, if there are demands in the countries, could make direct contact with the countries and arrange for some kind of export or deal for sale of the produce. We're hoping to launch that application very soon. We will be piloting it among the countries, and we are hoping that would stimulate more inter-regional trade in the Caribbean.
And there is also an effort right now to help the countries to fight the pandemic, the IICA challenge, right? Would you please explain what we can do to help? Yes.
The pandemic has had a very significant impact on the Caribbean, the restrictive measures associated with it, the disruption in food supply chains has also impacted the region, and a lot of work needs to be done. Now, CARICOM has developed an emergency agri-food mitigation and emergency plan in that regard, and the idea is that the countries would contribute to making that plan a reality, and it is based on really strengthening or trying to close the gap in many of the areas where we are seeing deficiencies. IICA in itself, we have been trying out a crowdfunding initiative as one of our many proposals. We have started with the piloting of it for Antigua and Haiti. We're looking at 2 communities in each one of these countries. And the idea is that what we're really looking to see is whether the crowdfunding model could be a viable option for sustainable development finances, particularly to rural communities, which are far removed from mainstream marketing, production, marketing, and distribution channels. How do we identify viable initiatives in their communities that we could elicit international support through small crowdfunding ventures and execute projects to benefit these rural communities?
Curt, it's really interesting, but unfortunately our time is up. So again, thanks for making the time to be with us. Curt Delice, representante do IICA no Suriname e coordenador de relações especiais dos países do Caribe.
And as IICA will be willing to discuss with you in further detail. Thank you.
E você pode rever este programa no canal do AgroMais no YouTube e acompanhar também outras edições do AgroAmérica por lá. Obrigada pela companhia. A gente se vê.